بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصل اللهم على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا غريب يا مظلوم يا شهيد كربلاء يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما قال الله في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فاصبر صبرا جميلا إنهم يرونه بعيدا ونراه قريبا آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم طيبوا أفواهكم بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. When we look at the previous verse that I mentioned, we see that Rabbil Alameen is instructing the Prophet to practice a form of patience described here as something we call sabrun jameel. And when we ask what does sabrun jameel mean, well, very easily the word jameel in Arabic translates to beautiful in English. So Allah is telling the Prophet to practice a form of beautiful patience. Now you may ask, what is beautiful patience? Some may turn and say, is beautiful patience, for example, a form of makeup that we apply to our face and we become beautiful? Or some may say, is it a form of perfume that we spray in which we become beautiful, and this is sabrun jameel? But when we look at the holy verse, we see that sabrun jameel tells us that there are actually different maratib, there are levels to sabr. Sabr is not just one thing or one specific thing. Through the ahadith, the countless ahadith that we have, we see that beautiful patience is often described as something that doesn't involve shakwa, something that does not involve complaints. There is a beautiful hadith by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi afdhal salatu wassalam. He says, "As-sabru al-jameel huwa alladhi la shakwa fihi ila an-nas." Beautiful patience is that of which there is no complaint to the people. And that, unfortunately, we see many brothers and sisters, when practicing patience, they don't have the full amount of patience. For example, as everything, there is an opposite. If there is sabrun jameel, which is the sabr without shakwa, sabrun ghayru jameel is the sabr with shakwa. We see many unfortunate brothers and sisters that are patient, but turn around and complain. They say, why Allah did you do this to me? Why this? Why that? But we learn that the meaning of patience and non-beautiful patience, from those two types of patience, 3 levels branch out. And these are another hadith of Imam al-Sadiq. He says, "As-sabru thalatha, sabrun ala al-musibati wa ala al-ta'a wa anil ma'siyah." Patience is 3 kinds. 1, in the face of calamity, in obedience, and in avoiding sins. To be able to understand these 3 levels, let's look at 3 examples, or maybe 2, on how for each stage we can practice patience. Number 1, for in the face of calamity, let us say we lose a loved one. Now, normally when people lose a loved one over the grave, they break out, they cry, they start blaming people they should not be blaming. Patience is when we flip this over and we have tawakkul on Rabbil Alameen. We become patient. We trust the plan that Allah has set for us. Maybe if that specific individual carried on living, maybe that individual would have carried on to do some numerous mistakes that would have made his akhirah much worse. Number two, for obedience, for example, we say many of us struggle to wake up for Fajr, for Salatul Subh. We can use patience by continually disciplining ourselves to wake up for Salatul Subh. And when we do this patience, maybe in the short run, it is something that is annoying because we have to wake up, cut our beautiful dreams. I know many of us love to dream, for example, about a specific candy land, or for example, you're in the middle of saving a town. But we need to understand that this is for our benefit. And this is the real inner strength and self-control of patience. As-ṣabr. Insha'Allah, give us an excellent place in akhirah, but it also has many scientific benefits as well. Patience has many scientific benefits. Unfortunately, we live in a society that because of the numerous external pressures that we have, many of the youth, for example, suffer from mental health problems, such as depression, anxiety, and many others. Through science, there was a scientific study, and I do advise if anyone has the time to read the scientific study. It was conducted in 2019, nicknamed Positive Psychology. It was done by a Dr. Sarah Ginter. Now, this woman did a beautiful study in which she wanted to understand what patience has and its correlationary effect to mental health disorders. And the study concluded that individuals who have patience have a lower chance of developing mental health problems such as depression and anxiety. Whereas individuals who do not have patience suffered a higher chance of gaining these mental health disorders. Another thing the study also concluded, it concluded that because of the practice of patience, the individual was able to grow their mental mind resilience. They were able to stimulate their brain into thinking more branched out. They can think more effectively. Their intellect was able to grow through the patience that they discovered. Now that we have understood what the Islamic part tells us about sabr and what the scientific part tells us about sabr, let us look at an individual who we remember in these holy nights who was an embodiment of patience. Was an embodiment of patience in the face of calamity, was an embodiment of patience in ta'ah, in obedience, and was an embodiment of patience in avoiding sins. And that was a Sayyida Zaynab salamullahi alayha. When we're asked about this lady, many of us believe that only her brothers were killed on the Battle of Karbala. Where in fact, on the Battle of Karbala, she did not only lose her brothers, she also lost her own children. Now think of the endurance, of the patience she must have had to carry out the message of Karbala after the battle. And to be able to understand, we need to understand as well that her patience was not a weakness, but in fact it was a strength. Unfortunately, many of us fail to see that sometimes sabr is a strength in the times we need. Sometimes in any situation that we have, a fight, for example, someone says bad something about you, sometimes it's best to have patience. And to understand the sabr of Sayyida Zaynab, we will look at two key areas in her life. After the Battle of Karbala, as well in the court of Yazid. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. We see that Sayyida Zaynab, after the Battle of Karbala, did something very important that we in our daily lives need to do. As she was a woman, she couldn't fight, she couldn't do anything. She used something that none of the army could have thought she would do. She took patience and she used it as an arsenal. She used it as a mass arsenal of weaponry. This was her weaponry. And her main weapon was patience. And she used patience in a very good way. She used it to grow her intellectual resistance during a time where she was placed under a lot of trauma about what had happened. She was shackled, she was starving, she was humiliated in the towns and cities. But what we see she didn't do, she didn't complain, but she remained patient. She carried out the importance of sabr to the point that in one of the cities in which she reached, Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, what did he say? He said, "Anti bihamdillah alimatun ghayru mu'allama, fahimatun ghayru mufahhama." You are by Allah a learned woman without being taught, understanding without being instructed. Allahu Akbar. Look at the amount of patience that Sayyida Zaynab, salamullahi alayha, went through, to the point that Imam Zayn al-Abidin says these words. These words aren't just normal words, they are strengthened words. They are to show the boldness of this holy lady. And now finally, we want to look at Sayyida Zaynab's patience in the court of Yazid. See that she used her patience and activated it as a beacon of resistance for the truth. We see that in the court of Yazid, not only did Sayyida Zaynab confront Yazid, but she also told him of a prophecy that will continue to this very day. And we say that this prophecy has continued because of our remembrance of Aba Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi afdal salatu wassalam. What did she say, her famous words? And we should all know these famous words. She says, فَكِدْ كَيْدَكْ وَاسْعَى سَعْيَكْ وَنَاصِبْ جُهْدَكَ يَا يَزِيدْ فَوَاللَّهِ لَا تَمْحُوا ذِكْرَنَا وَلَا تُمِيتُ وَحْيَنَا. So scheme whatever you wish and exert all your efforts and do your worst. By Allah, He will never erase our remembrance. Yazid thought that by killing Imam al-Hussein, the message of Islam, the love of the Ahlul Bayt would end. But we can say that the Battle of Karbala, the true meaning of the Battle of Karbala, started from Yawm Ashura. And the main person who carried out this after Imam al-Hussein was Sayyida Zaynab salamullahi alayha. Her patience that she had. Where Sayyida Zaynab declared her prophecy, as we mentioned, and Rabbil Alameen conducted this prophecy to the mass, because we see that nowadays we remember Imam al-Hussein. And subhanAllah, every year upon every year, our remembrance only grows stronger. And our remembrance grows greater to Imam al-Hussein. But finally, on a final note, we need to remember that behind all this patience, there was still a broken heart of a lady who lost everything in one day, in a few hours. Before, when she lost her mother, she used to shout and say her father used to be there to protect her. When she lost her father, her brothers were there to protect her. But on the Battle of Karbala, after the Battle of Karbala, who did she have? Her brother Abbas was killed. Her brother Hussein alayhi salam was also killed. She didn't have a single person to rely on. It is narrated by Arbab al-Maqatil that after the Battle of Karbala, Sayyida Zaynab went towards the battle at the middle of the night. She looked to her left. She saw where Abu al-Fadl Abbas had been killed. She looked to her right. She saw where Imam al-Hussein was killed. And then she looked towards the sky. And she was, as if they say, she was talking to her mother. And what did she say? She said the famous lines of تعالي يا أم الحسن يم تعالي شوفي كربلة سوت بحالي وشوف إخوتي مذبح قبالي تعالي يا يم الحسن يم تعالي. She said those famous lines because after all she had a broken heart, but she had a heart full of patience. So we need to remember, brothers and sisters, may we also live to the patience of Sayyida Zaynab. May Rabbil Alameen never remove us from this world until He has the rida of our actions. For the moment we take patience, for the moment we use this patience and use it like Sayyida Zaynab did, then we will be granted, insha'Allah, by the grace of Allah, the highest maratib that we can get in Jannah. وصل اللهم على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.